Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? My name is Marcelo Baqueroalvarez, and I'm the author of Authoritarianism and Propaganda and Woke and Proud, the Charlatans Inconvenience. And I want to thank also our friends at Reader's Magnet for giving me this opportunity to get a chance to talk with you guys today. So thank you so much for being here, and for everybody that would be joining us at some other point, as this video will live forever. But in any case, the topic that we're going to be covering today is something that I've been asked a lot of times to delve a little bit more into, which is the echo chamber and the cognitive dissonance that goes with the echo chamber. So echo chamber and cognitive dissonance, that's what we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. And it's important to actually bring that full circle, because that is one of the reasons why I wrote this book, particularly in Authoritarianism and Propaganda, the Puppet Master Tools. There's a particular chapter that I talk about how ignorance is not bliss. And we also talk about how the different levels of the political spectrum can actually be hijacked in some way or the other, and people can start gravitating towards a certain way of seeing the world that is just not accurate, but it seems normalized because that's what everybody else in their bubble actually see as the reality that they feel that is again, what they feel that is correct. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct, but it feels correct because that's what everybody else is saying. In a couple of times, you're probably going to hear me repeating a few terms. It's not that I'm skipping a track, okay? So I just want to clarify that. It is because I definitely want to be driving that point over and over again, because that is important. It is very easy to essentially program people into propaganda because it has certain repeating points, and it's going to be bombarding with certain terms and certain buzzwords, and that is created to be palatable, but just complex enough to make a person believe that they are incredibly smart for figuring this crazy thing. But it is actually a very easy thing to make it palatable. Okay, so again, as I am using certain words again, because palatable means people are going to be enjoying it and probably going to be wanting more of that, and they're going to be enjoying to see what somebody has to say that seems to have a better side of the history, or the version of history that is being fed to them. Okay, so everybody feels happy in their group. That's how it actually starts with the cognitive dissonance. Everybody that I know, they believe in a certain doctrine, in a certain set of how we do things, and this is how we work, and this is how we live our lives. That's normal how it starts. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, because a lot of times we might actually have a certain society that has certain values, and we embrace those values, and we embrace the way that we are enjoying our our group of people, that could be family, could be friends, we try to gravitate, we tend to gravitate towards people that they think like we do. When it becomes sinister is that sometimes that can be hijacked, and that can be actually hijacked by somebody who wants to start implanting a certain reality that is not necessarily good for the rest of that group, but but it's only good for the person who's actually pushing that particular narrative. And particularly the propagandists are going to be doing that. They're going to cling onto certain good values that a person might have, and we can talk about anything. It doesn't really necessarily matter what it is. It's if there is a bias, there's a way to exploit it if we're not careful. So some of the big biases that we see, of course, is going to be a political, a religious bias, an organizational bias. There could be different feeling that we have towards any of those things that I was actually mentioning. Okay, so let's say that we're not going to be talking about the religious or the political part for right now because they tend to be very visceral. But let's say that it's more of an organizational bias. So, for example, let's say a sporting. Uh, Maybe that sporting that we really like, they haven't won a season in 20 years. But don't you be telling anything bad about my team because that's my team. We are going to start fighting if we actually talk about that team. So you see how that actually works. So maybe that team itself is not necessarily as important, but is what this team represents. So perhaps for that person they have their family and they've been going to the stadium and they get the big hot dogs or whatever the drinks and have the big number one with the big finger, with foam, whatnot, and it becomes an event that you enjoy that. So that is kind of like how that works. Zuri, hi, thank you.
Thank You is the third full-length album by
Thank
Swedish
you.
hard rock
Oh,
band
sorry.
Hardcore.
Oh, sorry. Was out there, so my Siri start talking to me also there. Thank you so much. We're going to be talking a lot about that, so I really appreciate you being here. So, talking a little bit, into this example, as I said, the a person, let's say goes in the stadium and they've been going with their family or with their mom, the dad, whoever, the person, maybe their siblings, and it's been a great event. Every time they go there, they not only cheering, but they have the preparation before the game, during the game. They're really happy, even if the game doesn't win or end, it doesn't matter because they're going to have a wonderful time. So let's add another layer. Let's say that, for example, maybe one of the people that they used to be going to this game is no longer with us. Something tragic happened to them. Then this game becomes a symbol of something a lot bigger. Becomes a symbol of something that it's not necessarily if the team wins or loses. That is not going to be the important thing. You don't talk crap about my team because now you're talking crap about my memories, that family member, that person that was so important that is linked to this team. And that's a little bit how this cognitive dissonance starts actually working into people, because now the rationality is going to be going away. Whenever we have a visceral response, the first thing that goes is going to be rationality. Rationality off the window. Okay. And again, I keep repeating these things because the way that we deprogram propaganda is by having to chisel those things little by little. And it's going to be really easy not to create a mess, but it's a lot harder to clean it up. Does that make sense? Okay. So, for example, okay, if you're starting to piling laundry, very easy to pile laundry, but then actually washing the laundry and folding the laundry and put it away, a whole different situation. And that's why I'm saying very easy to make a mess, a lot harder to actually fix that mess. All right. So, as I say, it becomes a gradual process, little by little, let's say, like even if we have Peggy, thank you so much. I really appreciate, thank you so much for being here. So going now with this laundry example, if it might not be taking you one day to have this entire room full of laundry that is just like full of unused clothes, or a lot of people, probably they have that one chair or that one ballet or that one piece of furniture that first it was only maybe a piece of clothing, and there's more clothing, and then all of a sudden it's just become this wall of clothes. Okay, so that doesn't happen necessarily that somebody's just like tossing their entire closet into that chair or to the ballet or whatever place that actually have those clothes. But it takes enough time for that to start piling up. If for some reason this is not just necessarily normalized but even condoned, then it is a lot easier for people to say, okay, not bad. I mean, we all have like a big pile of clothes somewhere, right? I mean, everybody has like a big pile of laundry at some point. You know, why am I even going to folding? And I'm just going to be making a big bowl and just like pulling some stuff from that and maybe start like wearing that. I'm not condoning, saying people should be doing that, but that doesn't happen in a lot of in a lot of areas. And I'm not trying not to make a diss on any person that might be going into a situation. I want to draw the parallel as far how that actually works with propaganda. Okay. Uh, Thank you so much, Betty. I really appreciate. So when we actually get to see our minds they get to clutter just in the same way, just like that piece of laundry that just keeps adding up and then just keeps adding up, and then say, well, I don't get a chance, to do laundry this week, and maybe my hamper is full, and okay, I'm gonna wear this thing later on. So you just like kind of like keep putting it up, and then all of a sudden it just gets bigger and bigger. Our mind does the same thing. And when there's a particular group of people that they seem to agree with certain things that are not necessarily good for us, but they seem to be normalized, then it becomes easier and easier for us to be feeling. Mark, thank you. Hola. It's easier for us to be condoning these behaviors, and it happens. Okay, so how does that actually happen with the echo chamber? Okay, so a lot of times, probably you have heard, some of the swindlers. They have these guys that they say like these fast talkers. And I know I speak fast, but I'm talking about those guys that are speaking really fast, and they're going to be telling you all these things, before you can actually be able to think. They're going to tell like so much stuff, and then you're like, "Whoa, I probably understood maybe one word out of the 57 that you say, but it sounds like you have your stuff all figured out. What else you have to say? They're going to be telling you something that is very fast, and they're not going to be telling you. They're going to be just sharing. This is going to be like all this misdirection, and then your mind can only process so much of that. And at some point, you go like, "Okay, I really don't know what you were saying," but it seems that some other people, while they were actually talking like really fast, instead of actually saying like, "Okay, what's going on?" they might actually be doing this. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more. And when that happens, then it creates that veneer that maybe somebody who's probably swindling you has something important to say. Chad, yes, thank you. I appreciate. Yes, that is very very important. Yeah, how that can actually happen to people, particularly when it gets personal. That is definitely spot on, and we'll talk a little bit more as far as that. Okay, so whenever a swindler starts, like sending all this information, and some of that information might be by design factual. There's going to be maybe, like a list of 20 things, they just spew up to you. And 1, 7, and 12 probably would be factual. And everything else from those 20 things are just gibberish. But then, because of those 3 points that actually have some sort of plausibility, then our mind immediately gets hijacked if the plausibility actually it's 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 distorted by the rest of the facts. It especially gets a lot harder when everybody that we actually seem to respect, they seem to be going like north and south with their heads, like, oh yeah, that makes sense, yeah, you hear that, because that point, like those 3 points, that really make sense, so maybe on all those other 17 points they also make sense. Well, a lot of times they don't. Okay, it's kind of like something, like when they do in a magic trick, like an illusionist, they're going to be doing some misdirection. You get to see some stuff in the front, and then it's going to be looking really cool. But if you see everything that goes in the back, is a whole different story. Is the misdirection, okay, pushing you to see something in a different way. And that's why I'm saying, the mind tends to get hijacked, because they're going to be looking at the bias, and then they're going to see who also believes that bias. And if that person has some level of authority, oh yeah, then definitely that is going to be getting their juices flowing and whatnot. So that's what I say. It hijacks the trust of the group by an authority figure. That might actually be believing whatever those 17 points in this example that I told you are not factual, but it's because those 3 points out of those 20 points, they seem to be factual. It is very easy to think, okay, maybe those 3 points they were so everything else is going to be spot on. Well, not necessarily. Okay, so interesting, for some of us who actually live in the US of A, it's in the politician in the political climate, in the political climate, and politicians, they tend to be a little bit different than in other countries. Lorenzo, yeah, that is correct. It boils down to opening our minds and realizing the beliefs that we grew up can be wrong. That is a beautiful way to put it. Yes, spot on. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. So, to this example, okay, so in the USA, we have some advantages that are also, unfortunately, a disadvantage. Okay. So, the huge advantage that we have is we have essentially an unlimited supply of somebody that is going to be speaking in screen, which it's not lost in the irony that I'm speaking in screen. Okay, but the difference that a lot of the politicians sometimes they are going to be having somebody that is going to keep them in power. Is going to be dominating them to some money for them to be maybe pushing a certain narrative, or they're going to be pushing a certain thing because it's either convenient to keep them in office, or they have like maybe good intentions, but it's just kind of like the nature of the beast. The same thing is going to be happening with certain TV channels. For example, you get to see a certain TV channel that leans towards this side of the political spectrum, and another one that sides to this side of the political spectrum, and they just don't seem to meet in the middle. That is again by design, because then if you have people that only believe on this thing and they're going to be gluing their eyeballs onto the screen and they're going to be continue looking at that information, then the advertisements are going to continue giving that information. The more that you get from that, the more you're going to continue believing that only that worldview exists. Meanwhile, everybody else does on this other side. Yeah, they're probably getting crazier and crazier on your mind because they are just not being afforded the same opportunity to plead their case or to actually explain their point of view. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with their point of view, but at least you're going to be understanding what you actually agree or disagree with them. Does that make sense? Okay, and we're going to be talking a little bit as far as that. So how do we escape about that? Okay, so it starts with that, and Lorenzo actually said it a little bit before, spot on that. It starts with us, to understand sometimes we might actually be wrong. So context, that is always the key. So whenever I have sometimes a conversation with a person that for whatever reason they just don't get it, okay, and it starts getting frustrating, a lot of times, what I'm going to tell them is you're missing context. You're missing context. And it's not that I'm just saying that as a buzzword, to tell them, to go away. But what I'm actually trying to tell them is, hey, there's a lot of information that exists to this particular point that you're saying, but you're just not ready to have this conversation yet. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Um, Eleanor, uh, do you think people use this echo chamber approach consciously because they know it works so they can continue using it? That is a wonderful question. So, and the answer is actually yes and no. So, it depends if you are the person pushing a person into the echo chamber, or if you are the person that is being fed that information and be placed on the echo chamber, if that makes sense. Okay. So, we're actually going to be talking about that. Everybody knows reading my mind. That's awesome. we're moving in the right direction. Okay. So, context, as I say, context is key, because whenever a person gets to get that information out of context, it becomes counterintuitive for us to understand whatever is wrong as wrong. It actually is going to seem counterintuitive. Anybody who's actually telling us the right thing is going to sound like they're crazy. Why are you telling me these things? It doesn't factor into that. So a little bit earlier I was giving you the example. Okay, so if a charlatan is actually giving you some opinions disguised as facts in a 20 point narrative. Okay, so it's like 20 important points, okay, into this narrative, and they're only true about 3 of them, but there's 17 out of those 20 that are bad. Okay, if a person doesn't have the context to understand what is going on with those other 17 points, then it is very, 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 very easy to start falling into that echo chamber. Because now what we happen, we have a different problem. Now we have a confirmation bias because now other people that they don't get to see those 17 points, but they are only thinking about those 3 important points that seem to be factual, then everything else becomes discarded if everybody else seems to be wanting to discard it. Okay, so the way that we actually escape that is by understanding the person who lives between our ears. Okay, sometimes that's the worst enemy and it can be our best ally. So the way that it works is, do we understand what a fact is, and can we actually trace where that fact originated? Okay, in a previous session I was talking that a fact is going to require three particular big components: if it is logical, measurable, and demonstrable. So if it is logical, does it make sense? Okay, if you would reverse engineer, like if you're I don't know, like saying that everybody's spying on everybody else 24 hours a day. Okay, well, there's probably some people who are spying on everybody else. Okay, even if it is 24 hours a day. But now the thing is, how are they actually going to be able to process all that kind of information? Does that make sense? So it wouldn't become logical to think that, okay, you can probably spy on a whole bunch of people, but you're actually going to be assimilate all that information. It just becomes a mathematical problem at that point. So which goes to the next part, is measurable. How would you even measure, how you can actually be able, to create a thing. And demonstrable, if you would be able to create a model that actually works that way, or that you can falsify it, or you will be able to unfalsify it, how you can go about that. So that's what I'm talking about. It makes it very hard, to do that. Yes, thank you. Understanding oneself first, so we won't easily fall into these tricks. Thank you so much. Yeah, that is the biggest part. Okay, because even myself included, okay, we all have biases. Okay, everybody has a blind spot. Well, human, it's just the way that it works. Okay, so it is very easy sometimes for us to be able to fall into that trap. And I'm going to make this a really quick exercise. Okay, for us, like to think. Okay, let's say that you have like a certain routine, in certain day, like in your morning before you go to work. You have your car keys in this place, your wallet, and blah blah blah, and kind of like you follow a certain routine, and then you do that in automatic mode. You're not really thinking. But then one particular day, your significant other say like, hey, don't forget to bring those cookies, that got for your worker, for your coworkers. Okay, you say, oh yeah, I'm going to remember, yeah, those cookies. Okay, so now somehow that gets disrupted in your normal flow, and you bring those cookies to work, but you forgot your phone, or you forgot your ID, or you forgot something else, whatever, it happens. And it happens, to us, and the reason is because we don't actually process everything that happens in front of our in our minds. Otherwise, we would have a head that would be like this big, to be able to process all that information. So what our mind does, it actually creates some logical shortcuts. Is going to trying to say, okay, there's a pattern, from here to here. Okay, and like for example, when you see like a video screen, you go like frame by frame, kind of like seems, this movie, like slowly like that, like kind of like between those frames. So the mind can actually be hijacked between those frames and start adding some information. That's how propaganda works. They start making some repetition, make it very easily adaptable, kind of like you become those cookies then, that are disrupting something that is your normal flow, but now it actually creates a different reality. Okay, so the important thing is that we have to understand, that whenever we get challenged with something, we might have to contend with something that we just don't want to hear. And for some people, that is actually going to be traumatic. It's going to be hurting them a lot, because it's hard for a person to be told, okay, you're wrong, or that you have a particular situation that you are being agreeing and it's just not good. JP, what are the key indicators that help distinguish factual information from opinions or subjective statements? Okay, that is a phenomenal question. So this is how you actually can see. All right. So as I was saying before, okay, a fact has to be logical, measurable, and demonstrable. Okay, so if you're able, to see, it doesn't matter, what they're actually asking you. Okay, let's say, that I'm going to be saying this is this is a cup of water. Okay, and somebody wants to call it, okay, say, hey, yeah, but you can probably put fuel on that thing, so it becomes a fuel canister. Yeah, but it's designed, to use, as for drinking liquids. So when we start, like seeing, that would be the first, logical use, for that. Can you actually demonstrate? Okay, yeah, like, yeah, probably I could very well put fuel in this thing, but it's not what is designed to do that. But if I start actually looking at what this thing is actually created, I can actually see, okay, if it has, the thermostat thing, it's going to be keeping that type of seal. If it has uh, something that it's easier for me to open and close, but if it would be like a fuel cap, it's going to be a lot different, because fuel, have like a different type of fumes and whatnot, so you actually be able, to measure, and then you'll be able to actually demonstrate, okay, that probably this is not enough even, to actually put fuel, even if you wanted to do that. Could you probably use it? Yeah, maybe, but it's not the intended purpose do that. So that's a little bit, like how some of the opinions, can actually start and say like, yeah, can you actually be doing that for a different reason? Yeah, I guess you can do that, but what is the intended design purpose for that particular thing? Hopefully that answers a little bit the question. Okay. And the reason, what that is important is because inaccuracy creates a culture of incorrect assumptions taken as facts. Okay. So let's say, for example, with the same example, okay, some people are saying, okay, yeah, that's for water or for hot liquids or cocoa or whatever, that you like would consume. Then if we start using that as a fuel canister, that is going to, of course, create a different problems, because that's not intended use. Julia, I think it's this highlights how susceptible people can be to with misinformation. Yeah, that's absolutely correct, and that's what I was talking before at the beginning. As far as how certain things start to get normalized. So we start actually saying, well, that particular worldview, it's correct because everybody else is doing it. Okay. So if I'm using my cup here to drink liquids that are meant for human consumption, but more and more people are starting to use this thing to put some fuel to put in their lawnmower or whatever, that it takes fuel, then little by little, the consensus from that particular group is going to be changing the intended use for something into do something else. Okay. So from propaganda, of course, it's going to have kind of like a little bit of a parallel. Of course, definitely it's not as in the nose as I'm actually saying it. It is designed to be very subtle, and it's designed to actually hijack that rationality from people. But that's what I was telling you before. It becomes counterintuitive. The correct answer becomes counterintuitive, because let's say, if you are now the only person who is drinking out of this thing, your coffee or whatever, it is for human consumption, and everybody else in town is using the same type of canister to fueling their lawnmower or the blow dryers, or like, like the leaf blowers or whatever, then that starts actually changing how the culture starts perceiving reality. Okay, these concepts are foreign, but somehow I understand them completely because how you're breaking them down. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you're enjoying that. And one of the reasons, what I like to be writing the way that I do, I have it in my website also, halflifecrisis.com, www.halflifecrisis.com. And of course, if you get any of my books, the QR code, it's here at the end, so that's where I write a lot about this information, and I like analogies, okay, because the human mind is actually designed to try to see certain parallels. Okay, we want to see how things actually make sense or don't make sense. That's, for example, why some conspiracy theories, they actually take on like wildfire, because they might be so sensational, but some people, might just want to give some type of meaning to something that is behind whatever happened. So let's say a kid is running and poop, just plops down, and follow down. So uh, so that it creates, that problem. Some people, they're running and poop, they fall down. How are we going to perceive that? Okay, maybe we'd say like, okay, the kid was running and fell down, that could be the fact. But a conspiracy theorist is going to say like, oh, maybe those shoes, it was actually the wind, or it was something else, it was actually creating all that problem, so it's going to be that veneer, because the mind is actually want to like, well, it cannot be sometimes that simple, we want to see, what is more there. Mark, let's see. Hola, Marcelo. I'm going to translate this really quick. Okay, so why the mathematical books was crying? Because it had a lot of problems. Okay, why the math book was crying? Okay, because it had a lot of problems, just like the situation around the world, and it's something that you cannot deny, that is complex and full of many challenges, from the agitation in the politics to the disparities in the economy, the crisis, the environment, the injustice in society, and the world that is fighting with a multitude of problems. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, that is very true. Okay, so um that is actually very, very true. The way that we actually get bombarded with a lot of information, as I was saying, a little bit earlier on, is that fast talking people, there's going to be telling you all kinds of things, it's very hard, for you to understand, what I'm actually saying. But then between that little bit of information, there's going to be something that might actually resonate with a person. Maybe it doesn't resonate the whole way, but just resonate just enough for that person to think, okay, maybe I didn't trust that person too much, but I'm listening a little bit more to them. I'll give you a really quick example. So let's say, like certain politicians that they got into power. At first, a lot of people, they did not like them. Actually, you would see them before, they become like sycophants of this person or whatever. I'm not talking just in the US. I'm talking around the world. And throughout history, they would say like, hey, that person, it's weird. It's dangerous. They is divisive. Is pedantic, it's pretentious, whichever like way they can actually just imagine and say like, okay, I cannot trust that person. But little by little, there's going to be that bias that other people are saying like, well, I'm listening to what they have that, and then creates those mental gymnastics, and then little by little they start moving to that echo chamber because everybody else seems to be agreeing through that. And with that fast talking thing that everything that's going is also so fast, then all of a sudden they cannot even track all the craziness that this other person that was doing, that it was happening so far back then. So that's kind of like how we get into this echo chamber. So we got extended a little bit, and I want to thank for Readers Magnet and for everybody for in the audience that has been asking these wonderful questions. So I just wanted also to say that I'm trying to catch up with everybody else. Okay, so if you ask some question I haven't been able to answer yet, whenever I have a chance, I'm going back and I'll answer to you. If for some reason I haven't been able to get there, please keep me honest. Find me in the social medias, and ask me the questions. But again, on my site and on my books, I actually bring all that information. Of course, my books are available anywhere where books are sold. So if you want to see or have any questions about that, I love to talk about anything that is going to help us break this echo chamber outside ourselves. Okay, we can only do that for ourselves at first, but then we can actually be the catalyst, that person with that authority in some sense, to actually break that echo chamber and start to deprogramming people from those problems. Okay, so thank you so much for everybody, to everybody, and to Readers Magnet. And I'll be back at 5 p.m. today for a roundtable session. So hopefully I get to see you guys all there. Thank you so much. I'll see you. Bye.